Hi, 2D Foundations folks, especially 2D Foundations folks at home. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about what you're getting. When you come to the office, you're going to want to pick up a gallon bag with your name on it. In that gallon bag are graded pencils and a kneaded eraser. I'm going to show you how both these work, and I'm also going to tell you how to use them so you can know exactly what you're doing in future projects. So I've got our graded pencils laid out here in order, and you'll notice that they have different numbers to them. Now, the one you've been using, your mechanical pencil, whether it says it or not, or your wooden pencil, and it usually does say it, is HB. And this guy's kind of middle of the road. Yeah, I know there's not an even number of pencils, but that's the pack we got. Or on each side, I mean. So HB, you might also know as HB number 2. And that is pretty much a middle-of-the-road graphite hardness. This is a hardness scale, and it goes from a little hard and a little soft there. B stands for bold. You can think of it like making a super dark mark. H stands for hard, so making a super light mark. The more H a pencil is, the harder the graphite is, so it makes a lighter mark. The more B that a pencil has, the bolder a mark it is, the softer the graphite is, so it makes a darker mark. So we're going to learn today what each of these pencils do and just how far they go. You also have a kneaded eraser. Now this guy here, his job's not really for rubbing. You can, but it doesn't really work well like that. When you take it out of its wrapper and just throw the wrapper away when you're done, you want to warm it up. This kind of feels like sticky tack. You can pull it and stretch it, and this is the way you clean it too. The other thing that's great about it is that it lifts off graphite. So for example, if I make a mark that's way too dark, and let me just make a little mark here for you to see. So if I make a mark that's way too dark and I go, oh no, I made that too dark, I can take this guy and just lift off a little bit, and you can see it getting lighter there a little at a time. Now the other thing is you can also see it got really dirty from doing that, but if I need to clean it, I just stretch it, mush it all up. Eventually it'll fill up, but that'll take quite some time. So you'll probably get through the entire semester with just this guy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you just what these pencils can do. You can follow along with me in your sketchbook. If you haven't gotten your sketchbook, pick it up while you're picking these up today. So I'm going to start off with the 3H. I want to find out just what this guy can do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make what's called a value scale. Remember, value is the difference between light and dark. So I'm going to go from as light as I possibly can to as dark as I possibly can. I just push down gradually, a little at a time. And it doesn't matter how far you go. You just want to make sure that you're really trying to make it even. If you're not sure you're making it even, squint at it real tight. It'll help you see the value better. It'll look a little blurry, but you'll really be able to see the difference between light and dark. I think that's about as heavy as this guy's getting. I'm squinting. I'm not seeing a big difference here. So now I'm going to set this one down. I'm going to move to H. You can already see this guy gets way darker than 3H got. Now we'll switch to HB. This is our number 2 pencil, middle of the road, the one most people are used to. If you accidentally make a mistake and you go too heavy, go back and feather it out a little bit. Like I made a big jump right there. Feather that out just a little bit. I feathered it just by pushing extremely lightly there and balancing it out until it looked good to my eye. That looks pretty good there. And I'm just kind of pushed until I figured it wasn't getting any darker. Let's try 2B. You notice your marks are getting very zigzaggy. You can move your pencil in ovals. That makes the line overlap itself, and you don't notice the zigzags as much. You also notice I'm using the side of my graphite tip, not the very pointy tip of the graphite. It's dark there. Switching to 4B. Might have gotten a little aggressive on this guy, but that's okay. Nice bold mark here at the end. If you need more grip, you can always switch back to writing grip and kind of use the tip a little more. It'll give you a little more downward pressure if you need it. And finally 6B. Now you'll notice too, even though this is 6B, this guy is capable of making a very light mark. It just gets a little more aggressive as I go. You can tell the value difference, especially if you look all the way back across the 3H versus 6B. It's a big difference. And I'm not saying you have to use all these guys all the time. There's about 2 or 3 of them that I use. Like I'll generally go for HB when I go for some initial value shading. So that's middle of the road, gives me good mid-tones and shadows. When I'm starting to draw, I'll usually draw in 3H just so I don't get too heavy-handed. It makes light marks no matter what. Like if I draw with 3H, let's see if I just put a little scribble here. Even though I'm pressing pretty decently hard here, it's only making a light mark. When I go to really refine my value, I'll reach right for the 6B because I know I can go light to super dark with that. But if you really want to be refined, you want to try them all, then by all means, that's the thing to do. Now that's pressure shading. There are ways of making marks that for values, for changing value, that don't rely on just pressure. The rest of them rely on mark making. We'll show you that next. All right, you can see here I've got my pencils, but just to prove to you that this actually works, I switched to an ultra-fine Sharpie. And the reason for that is because I can't control value just by pressing. If I try to, it makes a solid dark mark no matter if I press hard or if I press lightly. This should prove that this will work no matter what. So this right up here is called pressure shading. I'm going to write pressure shading here. You can write that in your book too, just so you remember that this is pressure shading. And those are your value scales. We can even write value scale here. Value scales. But in order for mark-making techniques to work, basically each mark-making technique I'm about to show you blocks out more and more white space. The more white space you block out on the paper, the darker the area is going to look. These techniques I'm about to show you are very popular with comic book and graphic novel designers. A lot of inkers use this because they don't, when you're inking something, you don't have the luxury of pressure shading. So I'm going to show you a few of them. First one I'm going to show you is called hatching. And I'm going to write it here. You can write it there too. This is a good guide to keep in your book. So in case you ever need a texture or something, you can refer back to this. So hatching is making lines just in one direction. And when you do this, the more space you block out, the darker it looks. So for example, I'm going to go evenly spaced all the way across. I'm going to do a whole bunch of these guys like this. There we go. Okay, now that looks like all one value. And you might say, well, it looks like a giant number, but it really doesn't look like a lot of value. Well, the more we add, the more you'll see it. So I'm going to leave these guys alone right here, and I'm going to scoot over about 4, and I'm going to add in another one every other time. So in between spaces. And I'm going to scoot over from that about 4, and over here I'm going to add one in between every other time. And I'm going to scoot over 1. I'm going to add one more in between every other time. Or at least I'm going to try. And I'll scoot over from that and add one in every other time. So you can see the more marks that are together, and we can even do like solid marks here to prove that that works too. The more marks that are closer and closer together, the darker the value. The farther apart they are, the lighter the value. Now there's another one called cross hatching. And the cool thing about this one, so write this in your book too. The cool thing about this one is you do it in relatively the same way, but instead of leaving more space, we just crisscross lines. So I'm going to start off this time. I'm going to go all the way across with some lines just like I did before, except these guys are going horizontally and they're way longer. That's pretty good. And then I'm going to scoot over a little from here. So I'll leave this. This will be my first value. And then for the rest of it, I'm going to go this way and crisscross. And then I'll put one on the end just for good measure. And I'll scoot over a little from here and I'll crisscross these guys. Each time I switch directions. Scoot over a little bit and crisscross these guys. Now eventually you'll run out of directions to go, and there's nothing wrong with that. So just alter it ever so slightly. So if I went on a 45-degree angle last time, maybe I'll switch and go like a 30-degree angle and crisscross this way. And I'll crisscross back that way. And I'll throw in some more horizontal, slightly horizontal guys this way. And there we go. And you can see it kind of getting darker and darker as it goes. I got a little abrupt there. I probably should have, but I can always go back and make little adjustments here and there. But that's cross hatching. And you probably, this is a very familiar style. A lot of artists use this. A lot of designers and comic artists use this too. So that's cross hatching. We're going to go now to stippling. It's a funny sounding word, but it basically means making dots. So we're going to just scatter some dots equal as spacing as we can all over this section here. I'm going to try and go the same width and length that I did on the last two. That's pretty close, I guess. I'm not 100% accurate, but that's okay. So now I'm going to scoot over a little bit, and I'm going to add more dots in between. And I'm not really counting. I'm just, trying to space them out equally and be honest. And then I'm going to scoot over a little bit and make more dots in between. You got to go slow when you do this. If you notice where I'm speeding here, I'm getting these little comet tails. You don't want that. So do as I say, not as I do, and go a little slower than I'm going. I'm moving fast for the purpose of demonstration. So now I'll scoot over a little bit here, and I'll add more dots in between. This one takes some time. It's a cool look, but it's definitely time consuming. And then we'll go a little more dots in between here. I'm left-handed, my hand's getting in the way, I'm sure. And a little more dots here. Kind of fill in like that. So you can see the more concentrated the dots are, the darker it looks. And if you feel like you got a little uneven, and I know I got uneven, there's nothing wrong with going back and adding more dots to kind of even things out where you need to. I never even actually got solid over here. I suppose I could if I wanted to, but I don't want to waste your time. So let's move on to the next one. And the next one is called Scumbling, which is another funny sounding word. Scumbling means controlled scribbles. So not just going nuts, but kind of making a certain pattern to your scribbling. I'm going to use a figure 8 for mine. So I'm going to kind of go this way. And what I'm going to try and do, sorry, I'm left-handed. I know I'm covering over my work. What I'm going to try and do is just kind of make these figure 8s over and over again, all the way across in a relatively even way. Okay, and then as I come back this way, so I'll stop there, and I'll come back this way, and I'll add a few more figure 8s. I can always change the direction of my figure 8s too, but I'm trying to stay even. And then I'll scoot over a little bit, and I'll add some more figure 8s. I'll make sideways figure 8s this time. And squint at it a lot. Like if you're not sure you're right, squint a little bit and see. And you might say, when in the world would I ever use that? That's kind of weird looking. Yeah, it is, but you want to save these things for different textures you might need. Like this one might look really good on like aquatic life. Like if you're doing a picture of a fish have scales, maybe you don't want to draw every single scale. That might be the technique there. This one looks really good for like organic things like plants, or roots or things like that. Even hair sometimes. Like if you have a furry animal, this might be a good one to use. So you kind of use them based on what you want your visual textures to look like. But these are the basic mark making techniques here. These are the pressure shading techniques here. If you practiced along with me, and I hope you did, that will give you a good sense of what you're doing as we move into value, because the rest of the projects from here on out are going to involve value. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions. Have an enjoyable time doing this. It is kind of relaxing just to kind of sit here and shade or to make marks. So I really hope you do enjoy this. But if you need me for anything, email me or Canvas message me, and I will see you on the next one. Bye bye.